Hey, good afternoon. So, the other day I was talking to somebody about, don't ask me how, but we were talking about varying forms of intelligence on Earth and different wildlife that had exhibited certain kinds of intelligence. And somebody was telling me that octopi, um, think in a completely different way from any form of life, in a way that we really can't understand by analogizing it to human life, because their entire body basically functions as one giant brain. It's not, one collection of neurons and then sort of threads of them or strands of them through the nervous system, but rather they're all sort of distributed quite evenly over the entire body, which makes it almost alien. So I thought I'd investigate this and see if I can find any evidence that supports it or to the contrary. So that's what I wanted. Okay, so the first stop is obviously the Wikipedia page, which at least confirms that they are viewed as an intelligent species, and it also says that there is some difficulty in qualifying their intelligence. Here we go. The scope of cephalopod intelligence and learning capability is controversial within the biological complicated by the inherent complexity of quantifying any non-invertebrate intelligence. But they have impressive spatial learning capacity, navigational abilities, predatory techniques, and all of that kind of stuff. So, of course, we hear some stories about, them accomplishing particular feats of problem solving and other bits. So, obviously, the Wikipedia page isn't going to solve this problem for us, but brain size and structure, here we go. Their brain to body mass ratio is the largest amongst the invertebrates. It doesn't say largest amongst species in general. The giant nerve fibers of the cephalopod mantle have been widely used for many years as experimental material in neurophysiology. So that implies that, at the very least, the sort of strands that make up the nervous system are larger relative to the size of the body in cephalopods than they are in humans, for example. Okay, so immediately there was a few other sort of questions and answers from not exactly reliable sources. The two articles the two pages that I've loaded up here, one's from The Guardian and one's from Scientific American. Obviously, the latter is probably more authoritative, but I thought I'd have a look at the Guardian article first to see if it offered any insight. Okay, here's the first piece of evidence that suggests anything resembling the claim that was made to me, and that is that the majority of the 500 million neurons in a cephalopod, or the octopus specifically, are in their arms. So, rather than the sort of concentration of neurons being in a brain per se, it's in their limbs. Again, does highlight that sort of thinking in a completely different alien way, but that it's spread throughout their entire body. Although I guess, what is an octopus except a head and some arms / tentacles. So, although it doesn't answer the question authoritatively, I want to find some evidence for this somewhere other than The Guardian, or at least see where The Guardian is cited as evidence of this. I just highlight a couple of these. Up here it's described as charming anecdotes, and they certainly are charming anecdotes. There's one instance in which the research collaborator was hand-led on a 10-minute tour to its den, as if it was a very small 8-legged child. Aquariums have attempted to keep octopuses in cages, and they've wound gaping and finding and preying on fish and other enclosures. Problem solving, they learn to navigate simple mazes. There was one in here about stacking stones as well, which was quite interesting. I'll see if I can find it again. Here we go. Wild animals have been observed stacking rocks to protect the entrances to their dens. Again, this is all very nice and cute and makes for good anecdotes and sort of anthropomorphize a little bit. But I guess what I'm trying to work out is is anthropomorphizing them entirely valid if their brains function in completely different ways to what we're used to. So there's a lot in here about the seeming paradox of something so intelligent having such a relatively short life, which is interesting. It's quoted here, one possibility is that an octopus's brain needs to be powerful just to preside over such an unwieldy form. And obviously, it requires a lot of our brain is dedicated to motor function, and we only have to sort of coordinate 4 limbs, and even then we do so rather imprecisely most of the time. I'm 33 years old and I still can't throw a ball with my left arm, so there's that. Whereas an octopus has quite precise control over 8 limbs, and so while that explains it, why it might be laid out the way it is, it doesn't really answer the question to a degree that I'm satisfied with, the original question that I had. I mean, first up, the subtext on the title, the subtitle on this article, Scientific American says 8 smart limbs plus a big brain add up to a weird and wondrous kind of intelligence. Partially supportive of this original claim. What it is increasingly seeming to say is that it's not that the entire octopus is one giant brain, effectively, but that it has a much denser to the point where overall there is more neurons contained in those 8 limbs than there is in the brain, but not necessarily that like any one limb would have more neurons than the brain itself, or that the head would. This is really interesting. The majority of neurons in an octopus are found in the arms, we know that, which can independently taste and touch and also control basic motions without input from the brain. So, there needs to be no contact from a central point through the nervous system in order to trigger some of these pretty complex functions. They can decide to do those things themselves. At least that's the way I understand what's being said here. That is quite incredible. This may or may not be hyperbole, but this is effectively what I was told, which is they represent an entirely different experiment in the evolution of large brains and complex behavior. If we can connect with them as sentient beings, it is not because of a shared history or because we share this, but because evolution built minds twice over. They're probably the closest we will come to meeting an intelligent alien. All right, so clearly the difference in intelligence is quite significant. A common octopus has about 500 million neurons in its body. Human beings have many more, something close to 100 billion. So that's, thousands of times more. No, I beg your pardon, 500 million. It's at least 200 times more than what we have, 200 times more than what an octopus would have. So, differing degrees of neurons. But again, very often the intelligence itself is not gauged by the number of neurons, but how effectively those neurons are used and to what end. I feel at this point we're kind of getting away from the core question, and I feel that it's almost been answered. That whilst the entirety of an octopus is not analogous to one brain, that they function in an entirely different way that gets us to a point where they may as well be considered alien, or as it was stated further up in this article, they represent a convergent evolution or a separate emergence of a mind. All right, I'm going to end it there.